Hi friends, in today's video I'm taking you on a mini food adventure. I recently discovered a recipe that is the beloved national dish of Egypt. It consists of humble ingredients that you probably already have in your pantry, and if not, you can buy them for just over $3. Not only is this a great extreme budget meal, but it's perfect for those that need to feed large families on a tight budget. Here are the ingredients. I have 1.5 cup rice. I'm using jasmine here because that's what I have on hand, but the recipe called for a medium grain white rice. You can use whatever you have, including brown rice. I have 1.5 cups dried brown lentils. I have 1 package of elbow macaroni, which equals 2 cups dry. There are lots of different pasta types that you could use here, but traditionally it's made with elbow. I have 1 can of garbanzo beans, which are also called chickpeas, and I'll be using 2 of my 8-ounce cans of tomato sauce. We'll be using this to make a sauce to drizzle over the dish. The original recipe called for a 28-ounce size of tomato sauce, and I'll put a link to the original recipe in the description area of my video, but I was thinking that even if I used half of 1 can for a topping, that's still quite a bit. But you can see how this works out for me and then make a decision for yourself at the end. I'll be using some flour to coat these onions that I'll be frying up. However, I did notice that some recipes had you just frying the onions without the flour. So if you don't have flour, don't worry about it. Also, I'll be using a little vinegar, some ground coriander. If you don't have ground coriander, you can use cumin instead. I noticed that some recipes called for cumin and some called for coriander, and I even found some recipes that called for both, so I haven't decided yet if I'm going to add any cumin or not. If you have fresh garlic, you can use that, but I'll be using powder. And then also to spice up the tomato sauce, I'm going to use some red pepper flakes, and that is completely optional. There are lots of substitutions you can make on this recipe, but I'll let you watch how this works out for me, and then we'll talk about this as we go through it. To start out with, I'm going to cut up this onion. You can use a yellow onion, but I already have this white one, and I'm just going to slice it up in rounds. This dish isn't just the national dish of Egypt, but it's also popular in other Middle Eastern countries. One of the key ingredients in this dish are the fried onions, and we'll be using these as a topping. It gives it a unique and special flavor. I'm going to salt the onions, and then we're going to be coating them with flour. But like I said earlier, some recipes didn't call for this step, so if you don't have flour, it's fine to omit. I read that this is widely sold in street carts in Egypt and also in restaurants. I also had thought I had read somewhere that this was created from the use of leftovers, but then I couldn't find that again. But just looking at these ingredients, I'm imagining that to be true. I want the onions to be fairly dark so that they'll be crispy, but I don't want them to burn. If they do, they'll be bitter. I took a bite of one of these and they are so delicious. I had forgotten how good fried onions are. It has been forever since I've had these, and what a tool they can be in extreme budget eating. I have an emergency meal for less than $1 that I'll show you after this meal that utilizes onions. There are quite a few steps in this recipe, but you could do some of these the day before. I reheated some of the onions in my toaster oven the next day, and they became crispy again, but you do have to watch them closely so they don't burn. The original recipe called for onions in the tomato sauce, but since I'm going to be using the oil left over from frying these onions, it's going to be infused with all of that flavor. I'll just drain it and use that. I'm going to start my lentils cooking, and I'm going to boil these until just past al dente. In fact, I might even take them off right at al dente. And then I'll start my tomato sauce with the oil from the onions. I'm going to add a half teaspoon of ground coriander. And like I said earlier, if you don't have that, just go ahead and use cumin. And I think I will add just a tiny amount of the cumin in. I'm going to add 1/8 teaspoon. I'm also going to add a half a teaspoon garlic powder. The original recipe called for chopped garlic, but I don't have that. Plus, it's less expensive with the garlic powder. This is meant to be a spicy sauce, so I'm going to add red pepper, but I'm only adding 1/4 teaspoon. And in retrospect, I wish I would have added a little bit more because it wasn't quite spicy enough for me. This is going to be a tomato sauce that's going to help to pull our dish together. We're basically going to drizzle this over our ingredients. So it's going to be a smaller amount that we're going to use. So having it a little spicier than normal is going to be best. And then I'll just add these together, and then I'm going to let it simmer for a good long while and let all of those flavors marry together. And then at the end, I'll add in a little bit of vinegar. The recipe called for 1 to 2 tablespoons of white vinegar, and I was going straight for the 2 tablespoons because I do love acidic sauces, but thankfully I changed my mind because of course you can always add more too, but you can never take out. So I went in with a tablespoon and tasted it, and it was plenty acidic enough for me. My final step is to cook the elbow macaroni. I'm going to cook it in salted water, and I'm going to watch it like a hawk and remove it when it's al dente. This turned out perfect, so I'll be interested to see how well this works in leftovers tomorrow. My rice is done and everything else is complete, so it's time to assemble the ingredients. I found the perfect size container that I'm going to mix the rice and the lentils in. I have a ton of lentils left, but I'm not sure how I feel about adding all of them in. Okay, our dinner has come together, and it doesn't look as big on camera, but this is a huge feast, and I think that this could easily feed 5 people and probably 6. I am starving, so I'm going to dip up my plate. I am anxious to try this. These flavors all work together, and the tomato sauce and onions add so much to the dish. I would have never thought to add all of these ingredients together, but this just works. This is so good, and these ingredients are the type that are filling, that they're going to stick with you. The fried onions on top just sets everything off. They're salty and they're sweet and they're crunchy, so the crunchiness helps to add to the texture of the dish also. Susie Karache, the blogger whose recipe I'm loosely following, likes to serve this dish along with a Mediterranean salad. This just has diced cucumbers, chopped Italian parsley, and tomatoes. And I'm using cherry tomatoes here because that's what I already had on hand. I'm dressing this with a little bit of olive oil and squeezed lemon. I'll also add just a pinch of salt. It always amazes me how refreshing lemon and olive oil are together. I really should dress my salads with this more often. Anyway, I wanted to add this in because I know some of my viewers have a larger budget, and also some have gardens that will be overflowing with tomatoes and zucchini very soon. I think this is a perfect side for the richness of the main course, and here they are plated together. I saved this in the fridge for my lunch the next day, and it reheated very well. Even the elbow pasta was fine, and as I said earlier, I was able to make my onions crispy by reheating them in the toaster oven. I tried adding hot sauce to the dish, and that works as a great substitute for the tomato sauce mixture if you want to skip that step. If you don't have vinegar, this is a great option because almost all hot sauces have vinegar as a component. I found lots of different ways that people are plating this, and some people were adding vermicelli and spaghetti to the dish. I think adding in fried vermicelli would add a nice chewy texture. I'm definitely going to try that next time. Here's a meal that you can make for $1.27, and you'll need the pantry staples of a few tablespoons of flour and some bouillon. You can purchase a 1-pound bag of rice from Walmart for 88 cents, and that would be enough for the first recipe in this video as well as this one. I noticed when I was pricing out corn at Walmart that the no salt added corn was 14 cents less than the regular corn, so it definitely does pay to check prices on each because it's not that big of a deal to add some extra salt. The onion here is optional, and if you wanted to make this a meat meal, you could add a pound of the festive ground turkey and it still only comes in at $3.81. You could also just use half of the ground turkey for $2.54 and then save the other half for another night. I made some brown gravy with a little bit of oil, a few tablespoons of flour, and some vegetable bouillon. I'm not going to show myself making the gravy because I just did that in another video. Instead, I'll put a link to that in the description area. You can use whatever kind of bouillon you have on hand. I personally love the vegetable bouillon because it has a great depth of flavor. For my rice, I had to mix in some brown rice with the white rice just to show you for plating purposes, so if it looks multicolored, that's why. On a side note, one of my viewers actually mixes those together, the brown rice and the white rice, just as a healthier option. I'm just going to top this with all of that luscious and delicious gravy, and then I'm going to top it with some fried onions. I got this idea from the first recipe. I was thinking about this dish and realizing how great these would be on top of this. And what an inexpensive meal this would be. Obviously, you're not going to use all of an onion for this dish, but I did include the entire onion in the cost. You could always use the leftover to make some onion rings if you wanted to. Anyway, now I'm going to give this a try. It's just as good as I thought it was gonna be. This gravy is like liquid gold. It goes so well on top of the rice, and adding the crispy fried onions just sets the whole dish off. This is such a nice combination, and your family's never going to think that they're eating a struggle meal that only cost $1.27. But be forewarned, you should make a lot of the gravy because they'll definitely be coming back for seconds on this. It's so good with the rice. It's just a natural combination. You could also garnish this with some dried parsley to add a little more color, but this is good. I wasn't planning on eating this entire bowl, but I couldn't help myself because it was just too delicious. And like I said earlier, if you wanted to add some ground turkey on here, you could brown the ground turkey and then add a little bit to each bowl before pouring the gravy over. And I think that would be really good. Also, if you're a vegan, you could add in some sauteed mushrooms here and then top it with mushrooms and then followed by the gravy. Or you could even add the mushrooms into the gravy directly. It's interesting though how just the addition of the fried onions really elevates this dish into what feels like a complete meal. We can make a similar meal by using egg noodles, and this would come in at $1.54. The nice thing about this product is it does have protein, so if each person ate 2 servings, that would be 16 grams of protein. It says it has 8 servings per bag, but I usually find that we eat a little bit more than that, so I would say that this would feed 4. And I'm showing the Winco brand egg noodles here because that was what was in my pantry, but I looked at the Walmart and it has the same amount of ounces and the same amount of protein. I'll cook my noodles in salted water until they are just perfect for me, and I'm using the same gravy I made earlier. This gravy does sometimes get thick when it sets, so if it does, just go ahead and whisk it and then add some more water to it, and it will help it to thin out. You can pick up dried parsley at either Aldi or Walmart. I believe I've seen it for $1. It's amazing how much it elevates the look of food. I feel like this would have been great with another spoonful of gravy over the top, but I'd already used it all. This is really, really tasty as well. I like this and I like the other one, but I think my favorite is the rice. I just love the texture of the rice with the gravy. It's like they were created to be together. It's a combo that, in my opinion, is even better than mashed potatoes and gravy. And then I decided to try this with the fried onions on top, and that made it so much better. Hopefully you'll remember the onions the next time you're making something that just needs a little something extra to finish off the dish. That's it, guys. Thanks so much for spending time with me today. I hope you found this video useful, and I'll see you next Sunday.